What would you do if the person you mourned for 8 years walked past you at a shopping mall, holding hands with your stepfather? Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you never questioned their loyalty? Do you know what it feels like to lose the love of your life in a tragic accident? Has anyone in your family ever kept a secret so devastating it could destroy everything you believed about your life? Today's story will challenge everything you think you know about grief, betrayal, and the lengths people will go to for money and forbidden love. This isn't just about insurance fraud, this is about a woman who let her husband mourn her death while she built a new life with his stepfather. By the end of this video, you'll discover how a monsoon flood became the perfect cover for one of the most heartless deception schemes ever documented. But first, I need something from you. If you're someone who values loyalty and honesty in relationships, hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, if you won't even take 2 seconds to support content that exposes these kinds of betrayals, how can I trust that you'll stick around for the shocking truth that's coming? The subscribe button is free, and your support helps me bring you more cases like this. If you can't handle clicking one button, leave a comment below telling me why you won't subscribe. I'm genuinely curious what stops people from supporting creators who work hard to uncover these stories. This case will make you question everyone close to you. Daniel Whitaker thought he knew his wife Kavya. He thought he knew his stepfather Lyle. He was wrong about both of them. And their betrayal was so calculated, so coldly executed, that it took 8 years before the truth finally surfaced. What makes this story even more chilling is how ordinary these people seemed. Daniel was just an engineer trying to build a life with the woman he loved. Lyle appeared to be a quiet agronomist, a dependable stepfather who helped Daniel through tough times. Kavya was an architecture student with dreams and artistic talents. But beneath these normal facades lurked something far more calculating than anyone could have imagined. When Daniel Whitaker stepped off the plane in Bengaluru in 2012, he had one goal: complete his 1-year engineering assignment and return to Iowa with a solid addition to his resume. He was 28, focused on his career, and India was just another checkmark on his professional journey. That plan completely derailed during a Krishna Janmashtami street festival. Daniel was navigating through the crowded celebration when he spotted her, a petite woman sitting quietly in the chaos, sketching the dancers with remarkable skill. Her concentration was so intense that the noise and movement around her seemed to disappear. This was Kavya Rao, a 24-year-old architecture student who filled every margin of her notebooks with charcoal portraits. Their first conversation lasted 3 hours. They talked about art, engineering, the differences between American and Indian culture, their dreams for the future. The conversation only ended when Bengaluru's notorious power cuts plunged the entire neighborhood into darkness. Within a month, they were inseparable. Daniel's company extended his contract, giving the couple 18 months to explore their connection. They split time between his corporate cubicle and her favorite cafes, between ancient temples and modern tech parks. Kavya would sketch while Daniel worked on his laptop. He would help her with structural engineering concepts while she taught him about Indian architecture and culture. Their relationship had an authenticity that impressed both families. Kavya's mother, a widowed high school teacher in Mysore, gave her cautious approval. Daniel's mother back in Iowa was more direct: if this is love, commit fully, but protect each other legally. In December 2013, they made it official with a simple ceremony at a registrar's office downtown. No big wedding, no cultural complications, just two people who believed they had found their perfect match. Daniel immediately began filing U.S. immigration paperwork to bring Kavya to America permanently. They had plans: she would complete her master's degree in the States, he would advance his engineering career, and they would build something beautiful together. If you believe in true love and want to see more stories about relationships that overcome cultural boundaries, smash that like button. And while you're at it, share this video with someone who believes in the power of international romance. They need to hear this story. The visa process dragged through administrative delays, so Daniel and Kavya spent their early marriage shuttling between countries on short-term travel permits. Daniel would work in India for months at a time, then visit his family in Iowa. Kavya would join him when her student visa allowed. Looking back, Daniel would wonder if those separations were the first crack in their foundation. But at the time, everything seemed perfect. July 2017 changed everything. Daniel was visiting his mother in Cedar Rapids when Karnataka's monsoon season turned deadly. The region experienced a historic cloudburst that battered the Kabini River basin with unprecedented fury. Entire villages disappeared under rushing water. Local news showed desperate families scrambling onto temple roofs, waiting for rescue helicopters that couldn't navigate the storm. Then Daniel's WhatsApp exploded with messages from Kavya's cousin Aniket. Kavya had been visiting a rural heritage site with her architecture classmates when the flash floods hit. The bus they were traveling in had been swept away. Several bodies had already been recovered downstream. Kavya was missing. Daniel caught the first available flight back to India, his hands shaking as he tried to process the messages flooding his phone. Friends were sharing news articles about the disaster. Rescue teams were working around the clock. The death toll was climbing. For 6 days, Daniel slogged through ankle-deep sludge with volunteer search teams. They checked every refugee camp, every hospital, every morgue within a 50-mile radius. Daniel barely ate or slept. He showed Kavya's photo to hundreds of people, desperate for any information. On the 7th day, rescue workers found her leather satchel lodged against a fallen tree downstream. Inside were her student ID, her phone, and the journal Daniel had given her for their first wedding anniversary. The leather was waterlogged, the pages swollen and partially illegible, but these were definitely Kavya's belongings. No body was ever recovered. Under India's missing in calamity statute, a bureaucratic measure commonly used during mass casualty disasters, the district magistrate issued a presumptive death certificate. The document was clinical, official, and absolutely devastating to Daniel. The memorial service was small and heartbreaking. A priest performed traditional rites on the riverbank where Kavya's satchel had been found. They burned some of her personal items, releasing the ashes into the same water that had taken her life. Daniel stood numbly through the ceremony, clutching that damp journal, the only piece of his wife he had left. If this story is hitting you emotionally, and you can imagine the pain Daniel went through, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because if you're moved by stories like this but won't take action to support the channel that brings them to you, what does that say about your commitment to justice? These stories matter. Your support matters. Don't be someone who consumes content without giving back. The insurance payouts added a cruel practical dimension to Daniel's grief. Kavya had a modest life insurance policy through her university credit union, about $42,000. Separately, Daniel had purchased additional coverage on both of their lives at his mother's insistence. That policy paid out $250,000 once the Indian death certificate was properly notarized through the U.S. consulate in Chicago. Daniel gave most of the money to Kavya's mother. He used his portion to establish an architectural scholarship in Kavya's name at her university. Friends called it a beautiful gesture, a way to honor her memory and help other young architects pursue their dreams. But every night for months, Daniel reread that water-damaged journal, trying to hold on to every legible word his wife had written. Grief changed Daniel completely. He left engineering, unable to concentrate on the technical demands of his job. Instead, he took a quiet teaching position at a community college, helping students learn CAD design. The work was less demanding, leaving him space to process his loss. He sold his downtown loft and moved into a rental property owned by his stepfather, Lyle Morton, on the outskirts of Lincoln, Nebraska. It was a windswept ranch house that seemed to exist outside of time, perfect for someone trying to disappear from his own life. Lyle had married Daniel's mother after Daniel's biological father died of lymphoma during Daniel's high school years. Their relationship was cordial but distant. Lyle was a semi-retired agronomist who spent most of his time consulting for agricultural companies in Illinois and other Midwest states. He would drift home on occasional weekends to see Daniel's mother and tend to his garden. Lyle's habits were predictable and comforting in their consistency. Same beige Volvo, same breakfast routine at the local diner, same polite jokes about Midwest weather patterns. He was a steady, unremarkable presence in Daniel's life, someone who provided stability without demanding emotional investment. For 8 years, this arrangement worked perfectly. Daniel taught his classes, sold custom carpentry pieces online, and slowly rebuilt some version of a life. He dated occasionally but never seriously. How could he? Kavya had been perfect, and perfect doesn't get replaced. Lyle continued his consulting work, traveling frequently for soil health workshops and agricultural conferences. He would send postcards from various cities, always signed with the same understated humor: "The corn in Illinois says hello." Before we get to the shocking twist that destroyed Daniel's world, I want you to pause and really think about this setup. Take a second to like this video if you're invested in Daniel's story, and share it with someone who understands what it's like to rebuild after devastating loss. Daniel's mother seemed happy with Lyle. Their marriage was stable, comfortable, built on shared interests in gardening and quiet evenings at home. Lyle treated her well, and after the trauma of losing her first husband to cancer, she deserved peace and security. Nobody suspected that this ordinary, dependable man was living an extraordinary lie. Nobody could have imagined what Lyle Morton was really doing during all those consulting trips. And nobody, especially not Daniel, could have predicted what was about to happen on an ordinary Saturday morning in May 2025. May 18, 2025, started like any other Saturday for Daniel Whitaker. He grabbed coffee at Gateway Mall before a departmental meeting, navigating through the usual weekend crowds of families and teenagers. It was the kind of mindless routine that had become comfortable over the years, predictable, safe, forgettable. Then Daniel's entire world exploded. Near the cosmetics store, a woman's laugh cut through the crowd noise. The sound hit Daniel like a physical blow because he recognized it instantly. He had heard that exact laugh thousands of times during his marriage to Kavya. His rational mind immediately dismissed the thought. Grief playing tricks. A coincidental similarity. His therapist had warned him about this kind of thing, how the brain searches for patterns and connections that don't exist. But then the woman tilted her head, and sunlight caught her glasses in exactly the same way Kavya's had during that first conversation at the Krishna Janmashtami festival. Daniel froze completely. The woman turned slightly, and Daniel saw her face clearly. Older, yes. Different haircut, shorter and styled differently. But the bone structure, the expression, the way she moved, it was unmistakably Kavya. Then Lyle Morton stepped into view. Daniel's quiet, predictable stepfather moved closer to the woman and rested his hand on her lower back with casual intimacy. The gesture was small but unmistakably romantic. This wasn't a chance encounter or a friendly conversation. This was a couple. Daniel's pulse started hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. He forced himself to move closer, pretending to examine sunglasses at a nearby rack while his hands shook uncontrollably. He needed a closer look. He needed to prove to himself that this was impossible, that grief and coincidence were creating an illusion. The woman, Kavya, turned in his direction. Their eyes met. For one frozen moment, Daniel saw recognition flash across her face. Not surprise or joy or confusion. Recognition followed immediately by something much more disturbing: alarm, guilt, and what looked like calculation. She grabbed Lyle's arm and whispered something urgent. Without looking back at Daniel, they both moved quickly toward a service corridor behind the cosmetics store. Daniel stumbled after them, his legs barely functioning. By the time he reached the corridor door, a mall employee blocked his path. "Sorry, staff only back there." But there were two people who just, "Staff only, sir." They were gone. I need to pause here because this exact moment, is when Daniel's entire reality crumbled. If you've ever had your world turned upside down by betrayal, you understand what he was feeling. And if you understand that feeling, but you still won't hit subscribe to support content that tells these stories, I honestly don't know what will motivate you. This is free content that took hours of research and writing. The least you can do is subscribe. Daniel staggered to the parking lot, his mind reeling with impossible possibilities. His wife, his dead wife, was alive and involved romantically with his stepfather. The stepfather who had comforted his mother through Daniel's grief. The stepfather who had helped Daniel find housing and emotional stability. With shaking hands, Daniel called his mother. She answered on speaker phone, clearly driving. "Daniel, can this wait? Lyle's picking up produce and I need to." "He's here at the mall," Daniel interrupted, his voice barely controlled. "With Kavya." Silence. Then the line went dead. Daniel tried calling back repeatedly. No answer from his mother. No answer from Lyle. For 2 hours. Both phones went straight to voicemail. By evening, Daniel was desperate enough to drive to his mother's house and demand answers. He pounded on the front door, shouting questions that made no sense even to him. Within an hour, police arrived and escorted him away for disturbing the peace. That night, Daniel sat alone in his ranch house and faced a terrible truth: either he was having a complete psychological breakdown, or the two people he trusted most in the world had been lying to him for 8 years. Daniel couldn't let this go. He needed answers, even if those answers destroyed him. The next morning, he hired Tessa Volk, a former Omaha homicide detective who had transitioned into private investigation work. Volk had a reputation for handling sensitive cases with discretion and thoroughness. Daniel handed her everything: photos of Kavya, copies of the death certificate, insurance documents, and that water-damaged journal he had treasured for 8 years. "I need to know if my wife is alive," he told Volk. "And if she is, I need to know why she let me believe she was dead." Volk's investigation took 2 weeks. What she uncovered was breathtaking in its audacity and cruelty. First, Kavya was definitely alive. Under the name Kara Morton, she had obtained an Iowa driver's license in 2021, listing Lyle's home address. Marriage records from Cook County, Illinois showed that Kara Morton had wed Lyle Morton in a civil ceremony in January 2022. Her stated maiden name on the marriage certificate, Kavita Rout. Close to her real name, but with a shifted birth year that made her 3 years older. The officiant had accepted photocopied Indian identity documents without conducting any verification process. Second, Lyle's bank records revealed multiple wire transfers to an unregistered account in Bengaluru, beginning in late 2016, months before the flood disaster. The amounts varied between $5,000 and $15,000. One transfer memo simply read: Consulting/contingency. Third, and most damning, Volk obtained a low-resolution security photo from a Mysore hotel lobby, dated 3 days before the flood. The image clearly showed Kavya checking in alongside a man in a baseball cap. The man's height and build matched Lyle Morton perfectly. If you're as shocked by these discoveries as Daniel was, show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this video. These kinds of investigations take real resources and time. Your engagement helps ensure I can continue bringing you cases like this. Volk's theory, which law enforcement would later confirm, reconstructed the entire scheme. Kavya and Lyle had begun their affair during one of his agricultural consulting trips to India. Lyle frequently met with agri-tech entrepreneurs as part of his consulting work. Kavya, who was freelancing for an architecture firm designing rural irrigation projects, had worked as a translator at a trade expo where they met. Their attraction was immediate and intense. But their situation was complicated. Lyle was nearly twice Kavya's age, married to Daniel's mother, and supposedly a trusted family member. Kavya was married to Daniel and dependent on him for her U.S. immigration status. Over 14 months, they developed a plan that was both reckless and potentially lucrative. If Kavya could disappear convincingly, they could collect 2 separate insurance payouts and escape the social complications of their affair. The monsoon disaster was a catastrophe of opportunity that arrived almost too perfectly for their needs. Investigators later determined that Kavya never boarded the excursion bus that was swept away in the flood. Instead, she met Lyle at that Mysore hotel, where they spent 3 days preparing her disappearance. They carefully placed her satchel, weighted with rocks, in the flood path where it would be discovered by search teams. The corrupt district magistrate who issued her death certificate received cash payments traced back to a shell company controlled by Lyle. Passport control records showed that Kavita Raut departed India through Chennai under a Malaysian travel document weeks after her supposed death. She entered the United States through a Texas border crossing, exploiting weaknesses in land border immigration checks. For 3 years, Kavya lived quietly in Illinois under her false identity while Lyle continued his double life, comforting Daniel's family while secretly building a new life with his stepson's dead wife. Armed with Volk's evidence, Daniel took everything to the FBI's Des Moines field office in October 2025. Federal prosecutors were immediately interested. The case involved interstate insurance fraud, identity theft, and potentially international corruption. They opened a joint investigation with Indian authorities to trace the bribery and document forgery aspects of the scheme. Before I tell you what happened to these criminals, I need to address something. If you've been watching this entire story unfold and you still haven't subscribed, I'm genuinely puzzled. This is exactly the kind of in-depth true crime content that takes serious research and storytelling skill. Your subscription costs nothing but means everything to creators who work hard to bring you these stories. If you won't support good content, what will you support? In November 2025, FBI agents arrested Lyle Morton at a Hampton Inn near Peoria, where he was conducting a soil health workshop for local farmers. He was taken into custody without incident, still carrying the presentation materials for his legitimate consulting work. Kavya was arrested hours later outside a Pilates studio in Council Bluffs, Iowa. She had been living openly under the name Kara Morton, working part-time as a freelance architectural designer and participating in community activities. The court proceedings revealed the full scope of their betrayal. Kavya's defense team emphasized coercion, arguing that Lyle had used psychological dominance and her vulnerable immigration status to manipulate her into the scheme. They painted her as a victim of an older American man who had exploited cultural and power imbalances. Federal prosecutors countered with hundreds of encrypted telegram messages between Kavya and Lyle, showing her active and detailed participation in planning the fraud. She had coached Lyle on regional Indian dialects to help him charm bribable officials. She had drafted the inventory of personal items to place in her satchel. She had even written condolence emails that Lyle could send to Daniel in the months after her death. The insurance companies sued for full restitution, freezing assets across 3 states. Daniel, though legally recognized as a victim, endured grueling depositions about whether he had missed warning signs in his marriage. One piece of evidence haunted everyone involved: a journal entry Kavya had written 2 weeks before the flood. In her handwriting, barely legible due to water damage, she had written, "One life must end for another to begin." Daniel had originally interpreted this as a poetic reflection on monsoon cycles and renewal. Prosecutors presented it as clear evidence of premeditation. A plea agreement spared everyone the spectacle of a high-profile trial. Lyle accepted a 14-year federal sentence for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and identity theft. Kavya, who cooperated in recovering $210,000 of the stolen insurance money from offshore accounts, received 8 years in federal prison. Justice was served, but the emotional damage was irreversible. If you believe criminals like this deserve to be exposed, make sure to like this video and share it with others who need to hear this story. The collateral damage spread throughout Daniel's family. His mother filed for divorce within days of Lyle's plea agreement, her second marriage destroyed by a betrayal so profound it defied understanding. The small Iowa community became obsessed with the case, which tabloids dubbed the Flood Bride fraud. Online amateur investigators dissected every public record, turning the case into a cultural touchstone for discussions about international romance, age gap exploitation, and the psychology of disaster opportunism. Today, Daniel Whitaker has retreated from public life entirely. He left his teaching job after students began whispering about his story in hallways. Now he lives off-grid near the Platte River, supporting himself by selling custom carpentry pieces through online platforms. In his only media interview, Daniel said the cruelest part wasn't the money or public humiliation, it was knowing that for 8 years, he had mourned a ghost who was laughing at his eulogies. He donated Kavya's water-damaged journal to a university archive that researches fraudulent death cases. "Let them study it," he told the reporter, "so maybe the next person sees the storm coming." Kavya currently serves her sentence at a minimum security facility outside Springfield, where she runs a prison art program. Her murals depict swirling floodwaters and hollow silhouettes. She has applied for transfer to an Indian prison to serve her remaining time closer to her aging mother. Lyle, incarcerated in Terre Haute, writes monthly letters to Kavya that prison regulations prevent her from receiving. He signs them, "Your second chance was worth the deluge." This story reveals how people we trust completely can destroy our lives for money and selfish desires. If you found value in learning about this case, the absolute minimum you can do is subscribe to this channel. Seriously, if you consume content like this but won't support the creators who research and produce it, you're part of the problem. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. The lessons from Daniel's nightmare are clear. Natural disasters can provide perfect cover for human predators. Trust, even in marriage, should never be absolute. And sometimes the most devastating storms are the ones that begin long before any clouds gather in the sky. For true crime enthusiasts, this case demonstrates how international fraud schemes exploit bureaucratic weaknesses across borders. For anyone in relationships, it's a reminder that the people closest to us are capable of unimaginable betrayal. And for Daniel Whitaker, every weather forecast mentioning heavy rain remains a personal torment, proof that some storms never really end. Thank you for watching this episode of Whispered Crimes. If you want more stories about betrayal, fraud, and the dark side of human nature, subscribe now and ring that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about Daniel's story. And leave a comment below. What would you have done if you discovered your dead spouse alive with a family member? Remember, the most dangerous storms are often the ones we never see coming.